I woke up to the sound of humming, not the kind you'd expect from a person. No, this was mechanical, like the soft whine of an engine winding down, or maybe winding up. It echoed faintly around me, vibrating in my bones, subtly wrong, as if the frequency didn't belong in nature. I blinked against the pale blue light filtering through something translucent overhead. Then it hit me. Cold air. Too clean. Too still. No breeze. No dust. No scent of oil or rain or human life. I sat up quickly, too quickly, and my head swam with nausea. My body felt weak, muscles rubbery, like I hadn't moved in days or longer. I looked around, trying to make sense of it all. Glass. Curved walls of seamless glass. A transparent dome, maybe 10 meters wide and 5 meters high, set atop a floor of smooth, sterile white. Nothing else. No furniture. No bedding. No doors or seams or windows. Just me, like a damn hamster in a science exhibit. Correction, like an animal in a zoo. That's when I saw them. Beyond the glass, gathered in clusters of twos and threes, were aliens. Real, honest-to-God aliens. Dozens, maybe hundreds. No two looked alike. One had a cluster of limbs like a starfish welded to a spider. Another was tall, serpentine, with a glimmering carapace of shifting colors that hurt to stare at. Some hovered, others crawled. Some floated on tanks of gas or water. And every single one of them had a pair of eyes, or the alien equivalent of eyes, trained on me. They weren't afraid. They weren't curious in the way scientists are curious, either. They looked like tourists. Casual, detached, spectators. I tried to speak. My throat was sandpaper. I coughed instead, staggering to my feet. My legs nearly gave out beneath me, and I pressed my hand to the wall for support. It was warm, not glass. Then, some kind of advanced material. Alive, maybe. Responsive. A ripple passed through the wall where I touched it, and suddenly, the humming stopped. A voice filled the space around me. It wasn't a voice in the conventional sense. It was in my head. Not words, exactly, but meaning, fed directly into my brain like thought injected with a syringe. Subject 471. HU. Specimen active. Cognitive functions detected. Limb articulation, successful. Retinal response, positive. Welcome to the Intergalactic Museum of Extinct Civilizations. I took a shaky breath. Museum? You are the last known surviving member of Homo sapiens sapiens. You are a level 4 intelligence, pre-FTL, post-atomic, self-destructive genus. Your exhibit status is endangered artifact. That last part made something in me snap. Endangered artifact? No. I stumbled back, the voice fading as the humming resumed. My reflection stared back from the glassy wall. A gaunt face with stubble and sunken eyes. Pale skin, bruised veins. I was still wearing my old flight suit, though the insignia had been scraped off, patches threadbare and stained. I didn't remember being captured. Hell, I didn't remember anything after boarding the shuttle from Titan Station. We were supposed to rendezvous with the Ark-class colony ship Endeavour. The last shot Earth had after the collapse. Did we make it? Or was I the only one who did? That question settled into my stomach like lead. Hours passed, maybe more. I lost track. The light overhead never changed. The aliens came and went in waves, observing, whispering in sounds too complex or too alien for me to understand. Some pressed appendages against the glass. A few made gestures I couldn't read. None of them tried to communicate. I sat with my back against the wall, conserving energy, watching, waiting. That's when the child came. If you could call it a child. It was smaller than the others, less ornate, less adorned. It had 2 spindly legs and 4 arms, and a bulbous head like an upside-down teardrop. It pressed one limb to the wall and tilted its head. Then it did something none of the others had done. It imitated me. I blinked. It blinked twice, in a way that looked practiced. I raised a hand. It raised too. I smiled. It didn't smile. Maybe it couldn't, but it twisted its mouth-like structure in a way that felt like a grin. Then it tapped the wall 3 times in quick succession and ran off. I didn't know it at the time, but that was the beginning. The next day, if I could call it that, brought change. A drone slid out of the ceiling. It was small, beetle-like, and released a cloud of gas that settled into the air around me. My headache vanished. My muscles relaxed. Food appeared, nutrient paste in a hovering bowl. Tasteless, but nourishing. They weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to preserve me, like a goddamn fossil. By now, I'd seen at least 50 different species. Some carried translator drones, chattering softly. I caught fragments of their speech as the museum's systems filtered meanings into my brain. Primitive. Last one. They say survive the collapse. Carbon-based. Low gravity tolerance. Very emotional species. Not dangerous anymore. Curious. Not dangerous anymore. That stuck with me. Humanity wasn't extinct because of weakness. We didn't vanish because we lost a war. We disappeared because we were feared. We burned too hot. Too fast. We weren't just conquerors. We were creators, rebels, madmen, dreamers. And even when we were dying, even at the edge of extinction, we never stopped fighting. That's what they didn't understand. We were dangerous not because we were strong, but because we were impossible to predict, because we refused to stay in our cage. And now they had me in one. I spent the next several days, maybe weeks, testing the environment. The dome was seamless. No cracks, no flaws, no visible technology. But I felt it watching me, adapting. I scratched equations into the floor using my fingernails. Basic physics at first, then more advanced stuff, quantum symbols, FTL theory, gravitational constants. Eventually, the food changed. Different nutrients, targeted supplements. Someone or something was reading my output. I responded by building. From food containers, bits of thread from my jumpsuit, strands of hair, even a piece of the drone I managed to disable, I began assembling crude models. Engines, ships, weapons. Not real ones, obviously. Just schematics. Ideas. Then I sat in the center of the dome and waited. The child alien came back. This time it wasn't alone. 3 older versions of its species stood behind it, silent, observing. I pointed to my model, then to the stars beyond the dome. I tapped my head, then my chest. The child made a clicking noise. The adults leaned closer. Progress. On what I assumed was the 20th day, the voice returned. Cognitive progression exceeds baseline projections. Behavioral patterns consistent with emergent intelligence. Initiating phase 2. Controlled interaction. A ripple passed through the floor. The wall shimmered, and a section dissolved. Open space. A corridor. A way out. But I knew better. Not freedom. A test. I stepped through. The corridor was smooth and sterile. No doors, no markings. Lights pulsed gently overhead. I followed the path. Heart pounding, muscles tense. Was this another cage? A larger pen? Or I turned a corner and stopped dead. A room. Circular. Small. In the center was a table. On the table lay a single object. My old flight recorder. The one from Endeavor. Charred, scarred, but intact. A holographic screen flickered to life. My voice crackled through static. We're losing power. No response from Earth. Titan's dark, repeating distress signal. This is Commander Elias Cross, last captain of the human race. I felt the blood drain from my face. I remembered now. The reactor had failed. We'd been adrift. A signal had caught our cryopod wing. Then nothing. Until now. I looked up. Above the recorder, etched into the ceiling in old galactic script, were the words, "One spark remains." So that's how it started. They called me an exhibit, a relic, but I wasn't done yet. They put me in a cage, thinking I was the last chapter in a dead book. They forgot what humans are. We write our own endings. And I'm not here to be remembered. I'm here to remind them. The moment the glass panel shimmered closed behind me, I realized the game had changed. It wasn't just a cage anymore. It was a stage, and I was the main act. The corridor I'd walked through was not some accidental passage. It was a calculated opening and invitation. Or maybe a test. Either way, they wanted something from me. But what? I took a breath, steadying myself. The sterile scent of recycled air filled my nostrils. No earth smells here. No fresh pine or burning leaves. No diesel or rain. Just cold technology. I looked down at my hands. They trembled slightly, not with fear, with rage, with frustration, with the desperate urge to communicate, to be heard. That was the problem. They had the tech to translate every known language in the galaxy, every dialect, every tonal nuance. But never mine. Not human speech. Not yet. Because I wasn't a fossil to be observed. I was a living, thinking creature with a voice they didn't want to hear. I was moved to a room not much bigger than the dome where I'd been imprisoned. But this one had more features. A chair, screens, devices I couldn't identify. The walls were matte gray, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. No windows. No natural light. The only window I had was the one they built into my mind. Subject 471. HU, Initiate Communication Protocol. The voice said again, calm, mechanical. Not hostile, but clinical. I clenched my fists. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I scanned the room, searching for any weaknesses. I studied the devices like a spy scanning a battlefield for exit points. They put a small device on the table. It looked like a translator, or maybe an interface. I reached out, fingers brushing it. It hummed to life. Attempting vocal to digital language conversion, the voice said. Please speak. My voice cracked like drywood. Hello, I said. Simple, basic. The device word. Lights blinked. Then a crackle, a hiss. Unrecognized language, the voice reported. I sighed. This was going to take time. They didn't seem to want to rush me. Maybe they had all the time in the universe. Or maybe they were underestimating me. Over the next several days, more likely weeks, they fed me data, attempted to decode my vocal patterns. Alien linguists observed. Machines buzzed. Screens filled with incomprehensible glyphs. I began teaching them my way. First, by pointing. A rock, a tree, a light. They repeated the words I made, rock, tree, light, in their languages, then recorded my response, over and over. But the real breakthrough came when I used gestures. I raised my hand and made a universal sign of peace, a flat palm facing forward. The room filled with low murmurings. Several aliens mimicked me clumsily, their multiple arms waving in different directions, some trying to copy the gesture with tentacles, others blinking lights from their eyes. I smiled despite myself. This was the start. As days turned to weeks, the strange device on the table became my companion, my only link to the outside world. It wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. It couldn't capture tone or emotion. It couldn't grasp sarcasm or irony. Hell, it couldn't even tell the difference between a question and a statement half the time. But it was progress. I started teaching it context. For instance, I'd point to a chair, then sit down. The device registered the connection and stored the association. I showed it how to express negation. I shook my head no. I crossed my arms. I laughed, raw, unfiltered laughter, and it recorded the sound wave. Baffled, the aliens watching had no concept of laughter. One even leaned forward, tentacles twitching in confusion. The child from before, my mimic, twisted its mouth in a way that almost looked like a smile. This thing was contagious. One day, the device beeped differently. I'd managed to teach it a phrase. Human alive, the screen read. The voice echoed in my mind again. Communication channel established. Intelligence recognized. Expanding vocabulary. I sat back, a grin spreading across my face. It was the first real sentence the device had learned. I was alive. That night, I heard footsteps approaching. Not the scattered observation groups. Not the usual tourists of curiosity. This was different. The door slid open silently. A figure stepped in, tall, thin, covered in iridescent scales that shifted with every movement. It had eyes deep and black like liquid night. But they looked at me, not like a specimen, like a peer. The alien spoke, not in words, but again in thoughts, directly in my mind. I am Dr. Calreth, linguist and ambassador for the Council. We have studied your species for centuries, but never had a live subject. You are unexpected. I studied its face, not hostile, not amused. Unexpected because humans are extinct, I said. My voice rusty but steady. I am not extinct. There was a pause. Then Calreth spoke again. We believed your kind self-destructive, that you burned bright, then died. You are a spark. I let the words settle in my mind. A spark is all we ever needed. For the next cycle of days, I and Calreth engaged in what I can only call the translation game. It was a slow dance of words, gestures, and thought. I'd say something. The device would record it. Calreth would correct it. Then I'd repeat. They wanted data. I wanted freedom. Sometimes the device garbled my words so badly I couldn't recognize them. Sometimes Calreth's corrections sounded like a new language entirely. But beneath it all, a fragile bridge began to form. One night, as I sat alone in the gray room, I thought back to Earth, to the cacophony of voices, the endless chatter in a crowded market, the cacophony of cities and wilderness alike. Here, it was silent, too silent. Communication was more than exchanging facts. It was emotion, humor, fear, hope. And that's when I realized something vital. I wasn't just teaching them words. I was teaching them how to listen. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. I was telling them about Earth's wars, how we fought not with honor but desperation, how we laughed in the face of annihilation, how humor was our shield and sword. I laughed as I told the story. The device struggled to capture it. Calreth stared at me with those liquid black eyes. Then it made a sound, a low, almost human chuckle. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't natural, but it was something. And in that moment, I realized They were learning. That night, I lay on the cold floor, staring at the ceiling. I was still a prisoner, still a curiosity, still the last human. But now, I was something else. I was a teacher. Weeks blurred into months. The device's vocabulary exploded. It learned abstract concepts: freedom, fear, hope, fire. I told them about the collapse of Earth, about the last colony ships, about the Endeavor and how we had drifted, lost in the void. I told them about us, humans, not just the wreckage, the extinction, or the myths, the truth. One day, Kalreth asked me a question, not in words, not in symbols, in thought. Why do you fight? When extinction is certain, when survival is a lie. I looked at the alien, at its perfect scales shimmering in the artificial light. I thought about my species, our history, our stubbornness. Because, I said softly, we are unpredictable. Because we don't accept the end without a fight. Because we are human. Kalreth's eyes blinked slowly. Then, perhaps, you are not extinct. That was the moment everything changed. They stopped treating me like a curiosity. They started treating me like an ambassador. Because, for the first time in centuries, the galaxy might hear a human voice again. When Kalreth returned the next morning, I knew something had changed. The way it looked at me, less like a captive specimen and more like a comrade, sent a ripple through my nerves. For the first time, I felt a fragile sense of hope. Maybe this wasn't just a game of translation anymore. Maybe it was the beginning of something bigger. The room was colder than before, or maybe my body had just grown accustomed to the chill. The sterile gray walls reflected no emotion, but I saw it in Kalreth's eyes. The curiosity, the anticipation, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Today, human, Kalreth said, its voice a smooth wave in my mind. You will face the council. The assembly wishes to hear you. I blinked, surprise knocking the breath from my lungs. The council. I'd heard whispers. The governing body of this system. A collection of alien species unified by laws, treaties, and centuries of uneasy peace. They were feared and respected. To stand before them was to face the highest authority in the galaxy. And now, I was to stand before them. The chamber was unlike any place I'd ever seen. It was vast and circular, a dome of translucent panels that curved up into a star-speckled void. Light floated inside like captured fireflies, illuminating rows of seats filled with creatures that looked like they came from every nightmare and dream combined. Some had eyes everywhere, on limbs, heads, even tails. Others were translucent, revealing pulsing bioluminescent organs. A few were metallic, gleaming with the cold logic of machines. But all of them watched me intently. No sneers, no hostile glares, just watching. Kalreth guided me to a podium in the center. My heart hammered. The device was by my side, my translator, my voice, my bridge. Speak, Kalreth prompted. I swallowed and looked up, scanning the faces of 1,000 alien eyes. Thousands of years of history, wars, alliances, and betrayals weighed on their gaze. And there I was, one human, last of a species thought extinct. I am Kieran. I began, voice echoing through the chamber. I am the last of my kind. The translator crackled, smoothing out my words for every year. I told them about Earth, the cradle of humanity, how it once teemed with life, with forests and oceans, how humans built wonders that touched the stars, then tore their own home apart with fire and greed. I described the collapse of our civilizations, the wars that burned our skies, and the desperation that pushed us into the void. We fled, I said. We scattered among the stars, hoping to find new homes. But many of us were lost. I am here because I survived. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw nods, gasps, and some who whispered to each other in languages I could not understand. Then I told them about the spirit of humanity, the part that refused to die. We are not perfect, I said. We make mistakes, terrible mistakes. But we are also creators, explorers, fighters. We are hope wrapped in stubbornness. The council members listened silently. Some leaned forward, others blinked with soft lights. Kalreth stepped forward. We doubted your species. We believed humans self-destructed. Your survival defies our understanding of extinction. I nodded. We do not give up. We adapt. We fight. And sometimes, we find allies in the most unlikely places. I glanced at the device beside me. That is why I am here. To speak, to teach, to remind the galaxy that humanity is still here. Suddenly, the chamber shifted. A low hum filled the air, and a new figure appeared. Tall, armored in sleek silver plating, its face hidden behind a visor that glowed cold blue. The voice that followed was sharp, authoritative. Kieran, human survivor, you come before us with stories and hope, but words alone are not proof. The galaxy demands proof of your species' worth. I stiffened. The trial had begun. The trial wasn't just a formality. It was a gauntlet designed to test every part of me, mind, body, spirit, to see if I truly embodied what it meant to be human. The armored figure gestured, and the room transformed. The vast chamber folded inward, becoming a simulation chamber, an arena of shifting landscapes and challenges. You will face 3 trials, the voice declared. Logic, courage, compassion. Pass them, and the council will accept your plea. I looked at Calreth, whose eyes shimmered in the dim light. You will not be alone, it said, but the path is yours. The first trial was a puzzle of impossible logic. An alien construct appeared before me, a twisting lattice of glowing orbs suspended in space. Each orb was a node of knowledge, a question, a problem. I was to solve the puzzle by linking nodes in the correct order, using intuition and logic. The puzzle shifted constantly, reacting to my choices. The device hummed, translating the instructions. I focused. This was a challenge of the mind, and my years of human experience gave me an edge. Where the aliens saw rigid patterns, I saw flexibility. Where they expected strict logic, I brought creativity. Slowly, methodically, I connected the nodes. With each correct link, the lattice glowed brighter. At last, the final node lit up, and the puzzle dissolved. A voice echoed, "Trial 1 complete." The second trial tested my courage. The chamber morphed again. Now I was standing at the edge of a vast chasm, its depth swirling with unknown horrors. Across the gap lay a beacon, a symbol of peace and hope. But the only way forward was a narrow, crumbling bridge. Suddenly, shadows emerged from the depths, beasts of nightmare, with claws and teeth that glistened like sharpened metal. I could feel their hunger, their malice. The device translated my thoughts into steady words. I will cross, no matter the danger. My hands trembled, but my feet moved forward. Each step was a battle, against fear, against pain, against the instinct to run. When a beast lunged, I dodged, barely escaping its jaws. The bridge cracked beneath me. I leapt. Falling, my heart stopped. Then I caught the ledge with one hand, pulling myself up. Step by step, breath by breath, I reached the beacon. A light engulfed me. Trial 2 complete. The third trial was the hardest. A vision of suffering, a village ravaged by war, children crying, families torn apart. I was given a choice: save myself or help the innocent. The device showed the consequences of my decision. If I fled, safety awaited. If I stayed, I risked everything. I looked at the phantom children, eyes wide with fear and hope. I knelt beside them. I comforted. I fought. I sacrificed. The simulation burned me, crushed me, tested my limits. But I held on. When the vision faded, the voice spoke again. Trial 3 complete. I stood before the council, exhausted but unbroken. Calretha's gaze was proud. You have passed, it said softly. The galaxy will listen to you now. I felt a surge of emotion, hope, fear, determination. I was no longer just a survivor. I was an ambassador, a symbol, the last flame of humanity, burning bright in the void. The council's leader stepped forward, a being of pure light and shadow. Kieran, it said, voice reverberating like 1,000 echoes, your trials have proven your spirit. Humanity is not extinct. You have our attention. I nodded, voice steady. Then let us begin. Outside the chamber, as I walked back through cold corridors, I understood one thing. This was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, filled with wonders and horrors, allies and enemies. But now, I had a voice, and I would use it to make the universe remember that humans were still here, and we were unbreakable. The chamber emptied after the trial, the thrumming hum of the council's verdict still echoing in my ears. I was alone with Calreth again, but the weight of what had just happened pressed on me like a star collapsing in on itself. I had passed. I had faced their trial and emerged victorious, not just by strength or wit, but by embodying the essence of what humanity was supposed to be. Yet, what came next was far more complicated. Now, Kieran, Calretha's voice was calm but firm. The council grants you an audience with the Pact of Stars. I blinked. The Pact of Stars? Another layer of alien governance? Another trial, perhaps? Or a chance to finally form the alliances I had dreamed of since being dragged from Earth's ruins? Calreth motioned me to follow. The cold corridor seemed endless, lined with shifting panels displaying star maps, treaties, and data on thousands of civilizations. We passed through security checks in zones where alien languages filled the air with alien melodies and harsh dissonance. Eventually, we arrived at a grand hall, the assembly chamber of the Pact of Stars. The Pact was an alliance of many races, an interstellar coalition formed centuries ago to promote peace, trade, and mutual defense in this part of the galaxy. The Council ruled on disputes and laws, but the Pact negotiated treaties and maintained order through cooperation and diplomacy. I was about to become a representative, a symbol of humanity, to plead for our place among the stars. The chamber was vast, its walls adorned with banners and symbols of countless species. At the center was a massive holographic projection of the galaxy, pulsing with light and color, showing fleets, trade routes, and political boundaries. The Pact members awaited me. They looked curious, cautious, and some openly skeptical. My translator whispered updates in my ear as I approached the dais. "Welcome, Kirin of Earth," a voice said. It belonged to a tall, serpentine alien with iridescent scales and eyes like liquid mercury. "I am Serix of the Larkeen. We are the primary mediators of the Pact. Speak your truth." I swallowed hard. This was more than a trial. This was diplomacy. It was politics. It was survival. "Thank you, Serix," I began. "I come from a world lost to time and war, but humanity still lives. We seek not conquest, but friendship, cooperation, a place to stand among the stars." There was silence for a moment, then whispers, murmurs, clicks of antennae. Serix tilted its head. "Your species' history precedes you. Tales of destruction, but also resilience. Yet, many Pact members doubt if humans can be trusted. They fear the chaos we have witnessed." I nodded. "I do not deny our past mistakes, but we have learned, we have endured, and we bring not just strength, but ingenuity, passion, and a drive to build, not just destroy." From the corner of my eye, I saw other delegates exchange glances. The Pact was listening. But then came the hardest question. Why should the Pact risk accepting a species so prone to violence? Your presence could destabilize the fragile peace we maintain. I clenched my fists. Because humans know the cost of war better than most. We do not seek to ignite new flames. We seek to extinguish old ones. Our survival depends on cooperation, diplomacy, and learning from others. I took a breath, then added, "Let me prove it. Let us form the Pact of Stars, not just as a council, but as a partnership, a shared promise to protect and uplift all species." That's when the real negotiation began. It wasn't just words. It was a dance, one that required patience, empathy, and unshakable resolve. Some species wanted guarantees, human military aid and defense missions. Others demanded transparency about our technology and culture. A few even sought human knowledge of Earth's lost technology, hoping it could give them an edge. I promised honesty and collaboration, but also warned that humanity's secrets were not easily given. Trust had to be earned. The debate stretched for hours, punctuated by quiet moments when I felt my energy draining but my resolve hardening. In a surprising moment, a delegate from the Vroth Collective, a species known for their pragmatism and cold logic, spoke up. "Humans' adaptability is undeniable. If they can survive extinction, their resourcefulness may be our greatest asset. But this alliance must be binding. If humans betray us, the consequences will be severe." That statement shifted the atmosphere. A binding pact, not just friendship, but an oath. Kalreth stepped forward, translating my proposal. A pact of stars, a binding agreement of cooperation, defense, and cultural exchange. We pledge to stand with you, as you stand with us, to share knowledge, technology, and resources, to respect sovereignty, but stand united against threats. The members murmured among themselves. Some nodded. Others remained cautious. Then, as if sensing my growing uncertainty, Kalreth whispered, "This is the moment, Kirin. Speak from your heart." I looked out at the sea of alien faces, some monstrous, some beautiful, all alien. "We are not perfect," I said. "We are a species forged in fire and shadow, but in our imperfection lies our greatest strength, our humanity. To survive, to hope, to fight for a better tomorrow." Silence. Then, the glowing leader of the pact, a being called Ameldar, rose. "Let it be known," Ameldar's voice thundered, "that the Pact of Stars extends its hand to humanity. This alliance shall mark the dawn of a new era." A surge of relief and joy washed over me. But the pact was more than a symbol. It came with responsibilities, military, political, cultural, and dangers, because there were still enemies lurking in the dark corners of the galaxy. Back in my quarters that night, I stared at the stars outside the window. The pact of stars had accepted me, but humanity's place was far from secure. I thought about my lost family, the ruins of Earth, and the countless souls lost to time, but also about the future, a future I would fight for. Suddenly, a message blinked on my device. It was from Calreth. Warning: unidentified fleet approaching the pact sector. Unknown intentions. My heart thudded. The galaxy's peace was fragile, but I wasn't alone anymore. I had the pact, and humanity's fire still burned. The alert blinked on my wrist device again, insistent and cold, dragging me from restless sleep. I sat upright, heart pounding, sweat cooling on my skin despite the chill of my quarters aboard the packed flagship Ardent Unity. Outside the viewport, the stars were steady, indifferent as always. But this time, they felt less like friends and more like silent watchers of an impending storm. Calreth's message was simple but dire. Unidentified fleet approaching pact sector. Unknown intentions. Defensive protocols advised. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to steady my breath. Just days ago, I had stood in the Grand Assembly chamber and helped secure humanity's place in the Pact of Stars, a fragile but vital alliance promising peace and mutual defense among hundreds of species. Now, that peace seemed on the knife's edge. I quickly dressed and headed for the command center. The corridors buzzed with activity, every station manned by tense crew from multiple species, their faces sharp with focus. Calreth awaited me by the central holographic display. His reptilian eyes flicked over the incoming data, nostrils flaring slightly in his alien way. "We don't know what they want," he said. "No communications, no signatures in known registries, and their approach speed is aggressive, typical of attack vectors." I frowned. "No chance this is a friendly patrol." He shook his head. "Highly unlikely. This is a military formation, and it's large." The hologram zoomed in, showing a cluster of dark shapes coalescing at the edge of Pact-controlled space. Sleek, angular warships, unlike anything cataloged by the Pact databases. Their hulls shimmered with a faint, unnatural glow. "Who could they be?" I asked, voice tight. "We have a name for them," Calreth said quietly. "The Revenants. No one has seen them directly, but their attacks have been whispered about. Ghost fleets striking border outposts, leaving nothing but silence." I swallowed. "So they're real." Calreth nodded. "And now they are here." The Ardent Unity shifted into alert posture. Defensive shields powered up, and fighters scrambled from hangars. I felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the old human instinct to fight, to protect, to survive. But survival wasn't just about brute force anymore. It was diplomacy, strategy, and trust among allies. I convened an emergency session with the Pact's military leaders. Representatives from the Larkeen, Vroth, and several other races crowded the strategy room, their faces grim. "We cannot let the Revenants break through," Serix, the Larkeen mediator, said. His voice was calm but steel-edged. "If they gain control of our trade routes, it could cripple the entire Pact economy and defense." "Do we have any intelligence on their capabilities?" I asked. A Vroth commander leaned forward. "Limited. They wield weapons that disrupt shields and communications, stealth technology beyond anything in Pact records." Calreth added, "Their fleet is smaller than ours, but their tactics are unconventional. We must anticipate ambushes, cyber attacks, and misinformation." I swallowed the knot in my throat. This wasn't just a battle for territory. It was a test of everything the Pact stood for and of humanity's place within it. "Then we need a plan," I said, voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "A defense that leverages all our strengths, technology, strategy, and unity." The hours that followed were a whirlwind of briefings, tactical planning, and diplomatic exchanges. I found myself navigating a maze of alliances and rivalries within the Pact. Some members wanted an immediate offensive strike to destroy the Revenants before they reached Pact space. Others urged caution, fearing escalation into a full-scale war that the Pact might not survive. In the midst of the turmoil, I also had to manage internal dissent. Humans on board the Ardent Unity were restless. Many questioned whether joining the Pact was worth the risk. Some veterans muttered darkly about fighting alien wars that weren't ours. I held a meeting with the human contingent, looking every one of them in the eye. "We didn't survive centuries of chaos on Earth to turn back now," I said. "This is our chance to prove ourselves, not as conquerors, but as protectors. The Pact is our future. Their faces hardened with resolve. Meanwhile, the Pact's scientists and intelligence analysts worked tirelessly to decipher the Revenant's technology. A breakthrough came when a Vroth engineer discovered an unusual energy signature in the Revenant's propulsion system, something akin to a resonance frequency that disrupted Pact sensors but might also be exploited. I called for an expert meeting. If we can replicate this frequency, I told them, we could develop countermeasures to mask our fleet or even disrupt their stealth. The team dove into research with fierce determination. Days blurred into nights as they tested simulations and prototypes. But then came the personal. During a lull in the crisis, Calreth approached me with a message from the Council. They wanted a private conversation. I knew what it meant. The Council was wary of human ambitions. Our rapid integration into the Pact was unprecedented and unsettling for some. The meeting was held in a secluded chamber, its walls glowing softly with ambient light. The council elder, an ancient being named Velzin, regarded me with piercing eyes. Kiran, Velzin began, your people have impressed us. Your spirit and adaptability are undeniable, but we must ensure your loyalty. I bristled, but kept calm. How do you propose to test that? Velzin's gaze was steady. The Revenants are a test, not just of your combat abilities, but of your commitment to the Pact. We need to see if humanity can act as a reliable partner, even under pressure. I nodded slowly. So, this fight, it's also a political trial. Velzin inclined his head. Survival in this galaxy has always been political as much as physical. Be prepared, Kiran. Leaving the chamber, I felt the crushing weight of expectation, but I wasn't alone. The Pact was my family now, and the Revenants were our common enemy. As the Revenant fleet closed in, I stood on the bridge of the Ardent Unity, watching the stars flicker like distant embers. Our fleet was ready, shields humming, weapons primed, fighters ready to launch. The first strike came without warning. Revenant ships emerged from stealth, firing plasma bursts that rocked our shields. Chaos erupted. Damage report. I barked. Shields holding at 70%. Calreth responded. But their disruptors are targeting our sensor arrays. The hologram showed fighters engaging the enemy, weaving through tracer fire. I grabbed the calm. All pilots, focus on protecting our carriers. We cannot lose them. The battle was a blur of light and sound, strategy and instinct. I felt every pulse, every decision a matter of life and death, not just for us, but for the fragile alliance we had forged. Hours passed like minutes. We pushed back the Revenants, but at a cost. Ships were lost, crews injured. I felt the sting of every loss personally. But then came a signal, a communication attempt from the Revenants. The Pact's communications officer scrambled to translate. A voice, distorted and harsh, but unmistakably human in tone. This is the Revenant commander. We do not seek war with the Pact. We seek justice for the wrongs done to our people. The room fell silent. I felt a cold shiver. Justice? I requested a parley. If the Revenants sought justice, then we had to understand their grievance. In the tense hours that followed, I negotiated terms for a ceasefire and a meeting between the Revenant commander and Pact representatives. It was risky, but necessary. During the parley, I saw something unexpected. The Revenant commander was not a monster, but a survivor, scarred by betrayal and loss, driven by a desire to reclaim honor and safety. Their people had been exiled, hunted by unknown forces. Their attacks were desperate attempts to survive. It changed everything. The Revenants were not enemies. They were victims. As we signed the tentative truce, I realized humanity's true test had only just begun. We were not just warriors or diplomats. We were bridge builders between species, between past and future. And in the shadows on the horizon, I saw the dawn of a new hope. Back in my quarters, I stared out at the stars once more. The galaxy was a dangerous place, but for the first time since Earth's fall, I felt humanity was not just surviving. We were becoming something greater. The tension aboard the Ardent Unity was palpable as we prepared for the parley with the Revenant commander. The fragile ceasefire was still fresh, barely a thread holding back the storm, and every member of the Pact's command staff moved with a mixture of urgency and caution. I stood on the bridge, watching the Revenant flagship hover in the no-man's land between our fleets. Its sleek, dark hull was scarred but still menacing, a a silent reminder of the recent battle and the uncertainty that now hung in the balance. The bridge's lighting dimmed as the communications officer activated the secure channel. The image that flickered to life was grainy and distorted, but the figure was unmistakable, a humanoid, yet distinctly altered by time and conflict. The Revenant commander. Their eyes were sharp, haunted by pain but burning with resolve. The voice that came through the speakers was harsh, but there was a weight behind the words, a story desperate to be told. "I am Commander Kalis of the Revenant Fleet," the voice began. "We come not to conquer, but to speak, to seek understanding, to find peace if it can be found." I swallowed hard. This was the moment we had waited for, the chance to bridge the chasm between two worlds on the brink of war. "Commander Kalis," I replied, voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "We are here to listen. Tell us your story." The parley was set to take place aboard a neutral space station in the Pact Sector, a place where ancient treaties had been signed and broken countless times. The station's massive docking bay was a crucible of tension as both sides sent their representatives through sealed airlocks, armored and guarded, but also wary. I led the human delegation, accompanied by Calreth, Serix, and a contingent of Pact diplomats and military advisors. The Revenant envoy arrived moments later, smaller in number but no less formidable. The room where we met was stark. No weapons, no shields, just a long table illuminated by soft, ambient lighting. I took my seat, feeling the weight of history pressing down. Commander Kalis opened with a recounting of the Revenant's past, a tale of exile, betrayal, and survival. "Our people were once part of a great civilization," Kalis explained, voice steady but filled with sorrow. "We were betrayed by those we trusted, cast out and hunted across the stars. We became ghosts, shadows moving in the darkness, fighting to reclaim what was stolen." The room was silent, the gravity of the story sinking in. "But we did not seek war with the Pact," Kalis continued. "We sought justice, the truth of what happened to us, the truth of the betrayal." I leaned forward, feeling the threads of our conversation weaving into something fragile yet profound. "What truth?" I asked. "Who betrayed you?" Kalis hesitated, eyes flicking to their advisors before continuing. "There is a force, unknown, hidden, that manipulates from the shadows. It used us, and many others, to weaken the galaxy. It thrives on division and chaos." I exchanged a glance with Calreth and Serix. This was bigger than we imagined. The talks dragged on for hours, fraught with suspicion and cautious hope. I had to balance the Pact's demand for security with the Revenant's need for recognition and reparation. At one point, a heated exchange nearly broke the ceasefire. Serix argued that the Revenants must disarm before trust could be built, while Kalis insisted their people would not be safe without guarantees. I raised my voice to calm the room. "Disarmament is a goal," I said, "but it must be mutual. The Pact must prove it is worthy of your trust, just as you must prove you are no threat." Behind the scenes, I worked tirelessly to craft proposals that could satisfy both sides. It wasn't just about words. It was about building frameworks for cooperation, intelligence sharing, and joint defense. The Revenants agreed to allow a Pact inspection of their fleet's weapons systems, provided the Pact offered similar transparency. But the greatest challenge came when Kalis revealed a shocking piece of intelligence. "The shadow force you fear," Kalis said quietly, "is already inside the Pact. They seek to undermine your alliance from within." The room gasped. I felt the weight of this revelation settle deep in my gut. "This changes everything," I said. "We must root out these saboteurs before they destroy what we have built." Kalis nodded grimly. "We can help," they said. "Our knowledge of the enemy's methods is unique, but we must act quickly." The parley ended with a tentative agreement to form a joint task force, Pact and Revenant operatives working together to uncover the Shadow Force. As I watched Kalis and their team depart, I knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was more dangerous than we'd ever imagined. But humanity and the Pact had faced darkness before, and we would do so again. Later, in the quiet of my quarters, I reflected on the day's events. The Revenants were not the monsters we feared. They were survivors. And if we could learn to trust them, perhaps we could finally stand united against the shadows that threatened us all. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with peril, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope. I never imagined that the greatest threat we'd face would come not from an alien armada or cosmic plague, but from within. The parley with the Revenants had ended on a hopeful note, an unprecedented alliance forged in the shadow of a greater enemy. We had agreed to form a joint task force, a combined team of Pact and Revenant operatives dedicated to rooting out the Shadow Force sabotaging our fragile peace. But peace was a fragile illusion. The joint task force. The task force was assembled in record time. Representatives handpicked for their skills, loyalty, and discretion. I was appointed as the overall coordinator, which meant I was now juggling military command, intelligence operations, and delicate diplomacy. The Revenant contingent was led by Captain Clara, a sharp-minded, unflinching officer with a reputation for ruthless efficiency. Her presence was a constant reminder that the Revenants were no longer the hunted ghosts of the past, but fierce players in this new galactic chess game. First briefings. Our first meeting took place in the Pact's intelligence hub on the station Helios Reach. The room was a fortress of technology, holographic displays, encrypted comm channels, and walls lined with data banks storing classified intel from countless worlds. I could feel the eyes of the Pact's intelligence officers on me as I stepped up to address the group. We're dealing with an enemy that operates in the shadows, I began. Saboteurs embedded deep within our ranks, spreading distrust, misinformation, and chaos. Our mission is to find them and stop them before they destroy everything. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of machinery. Captain Clara added, "Our people have studied this enemy for decades. Their methods are subtle but deadly. They don't attack with guns or bombs. They use manipulation, deception, and fear. The enemy within." It was disheartening to realize that this shadow force had likely been among us for years, poisoning the Pact from inside. Trust was the foundation of our alliance, but now that foundation was cracked, and every alliance member wondered who might be the enemy hiding behind a familiar face. I saw it in the eyes of my closest officers: fear, suspicion, and uncertainty. The uncertainty was the worst. If we started looking at each other like enemies, the Shadow Force would win without firing a shot. First leads. We began by analyzing recent incidents of sabotage, cyber attacks, and intelligence leaks. Patterns emerged, subtle but undeniable. The saboteurs preferred to operate in remote sectors, using compromised communication relays to spread false orders and misinformation. One such incident involved the destruction of a vital supply convoy near the Rhea Expanse. The attack had been orchestrated so perfectly it looked like an accident, but the task force's analysis revealed coded messages hidden in the convoy's distress signal. Tensions rise. The investigation quickly revealed deep fractures within the Pact's own hierarchy. Several senior officers showed signs of questionable loyalties, and some even obstructed our efforts. I confronted one such officer, Commander Harold, who refused to cooperate with the task force's investigation. "You don't understand," Harold said, voice low and bitter. "This mission is dangerous. It risks exposing secrets that could tear the Pact apart." "I understand perfectly," I replied. "That's why we have to find the truth. No more hiding in the dark." Harold's glare was cold. "Be careful, Captain. Some truths are better left buried." Doubts and despair. I confided in Clara during a rare moment of quiet. We were in the task force's war room, surrounded by star maps and data streams. "This enemy is more insidious than anything we've faced," I said, rubbing my temples. Clara nodded. "I've seen what they do to morale. Entire fleets have fallen apart because of their lies and mistrust. We must stay vigilant." "But how do we fight an enemy we can't see?" I asked, frustration mounting. "How do we protect our people when any one of them could be the enemy?" A shocking discovery. Then, late one night, the breakthrough came. Our cybersecurity team uncovered a hidden network of communications, encrypted messages linking several high-ranking Pact officials to a shadowy faction known only as the Veil. The Veil was rumored to be a secret cabal, operating under the guise of loyalty but serving the Shadow Force's interests. The implications were staggering. If the Veil had infiltrated the highest levels of the Pact, our entire alliance could collapse from within. The sting operation. We devised a risky plan. A sting operation to expose the Veil members during a clandestine meeting on Helios Reach. I led the operation personally, aware that any mistake could provoke open conflict. We positioned covert surveillance teams throughout the station, monitoring communication channels and scanning for unusual activity. The night of the meeting was tense, every second stretched thin with the possibility of betrayal. As the meeting began, The hidden operatives gathered in a secure chamber deep within the station. But just as we prepared to move in, the room's security system was shut down. A trap. Our team was ambushed by loyalists to the Veil, and a fierce firefight erupted in the narrow corridors. Holding the line, despite the surprise attack, the task force fought back with determination. I found myself shoulder to shoulder with Revenant soldiers, a strange but powerful symbol of our new alliance. The battle was brutal and chaotic, but we managed to secure the chamber and capture several Veil operatives. The evidence we seized was damning, encrypted data linking them to sabotage operations and secret orders from the Shadow Force. Aftermath. In the days following the raid, the Pact was rocked by revelations of betrayal and conspiracy. Several high-ranking officers were arrested, and an emergency council convened to address the crisis. I was called to testify, alongside Clara and other task force leaders. The political fallout was intense, but I remained focused on the mission ahead. A personal crisis. The crisis weighed heavily on me. In the quiet hours, doubts gnawed at my mind. Had we done enough? Were we still missing deeper threats? I thought about my crew, my friends, and the countless innocents caught in this web of deceit. A glimmer of hope. Yet amid the darkness, I found a glimmer of hope. The alliance with the Revenants was proving stronger than expected. We were learning to trust each other, to fight side by side against a common enemy. And that trust, fragile as it was, might just be enough to save the Pact. Looking forward, the road ahead remained perilous. The Shadow Force was vast, powerful, and patient, but I was not alone. Together, with the Revenants and the Pact, we would stand against the darkness. Because humanity, and all those who stood with us, had faced impossible odds before, and we would rise again. The stars outside my window burned bright with possibility. This was only the beginning. The atmosphere aboard Helios Reach had changed. What was once a bustling hub of coordination and hope had shifted into something darker, colder. Suspicion hung in the recycled air, as palpable as the hum of machinery. After the sting operation and the capture of several Veil operatives, the truth that began to surface was far more disturbing than anyone had imagined. Piecing together the puzzle. As coordinator of the Joint Task Force, it was my responsibility to oversee the next phase, the interrogation and analysis of the Veil members we had captured. That meant long hours in secure chambers, poring over data, listening to fragmented confessions, and trying to see beyond the lies they fed us. I found myself drawn into the stories of these operatives. They weren't just enemies. They were pieces of a much larger, broken puzzle. Some of them spoke of a shadow force older than any galactic alliance, something that had survived the collapse of empires, hidden in the background, manipulating events for centuries. The Shadow Force, an ancient enemy. The Veil's members talked of an entity they called the Oblivion Chain, a secret cabal that had orchestrated chaos for millennia, thriving on the division between species, between alliances, and even within families. The chain was not merely political. It was philosophical, almost a religion of nihilism that sought to shatter civilizations to rebuild them in its own image. According to the operatives, the Oblivion Chain had influenced the fall of countless galactic powers, including the Revenant's lost civilization and, more recently, fractures within the Pact itself. It was chilling to realize that we were not just fighting isolated saboteurs but an ideology, a virus infecting the very soul of the galaxy. A galactic history lesson. I convened with the Pact's historians and xenologists to verify and expand upon the Veil's revelations. What we uncovered was staggering. The Oblivion Chain had roots going back tens of thousands of years, long before the Pact or the Revenants rose to power. It had manipulated the rise and fall of empires, using spies, cults, and dark technologies to spread dissent. Even the human race had been touched by the Shadow Force in its ancient past, during the earliest days of space exploration and interstellar colonization. The Revenants' role. Our alliance with the Revenants gained new significance. Their people, survivors of betrayal and exile, had fought the Oblivion Chain more directly than any other civilization. Their knowledge was invaluable, their insights a key to understanding the enemy's tactics. Captain Clara became an essential partner, guiding us through Revenant intelligence archives and sharing secrets hidden for generations. Together, we began mapping the chain's networks across the galaxy. The price of knowledge. But the deeper we delved, the more dangerous the knowledge became. There were factions within the Pact who resisted our investigation, fearing that exposing the Oblivion chain would destabilize the Alliance. Commander Harold's warnings echoed louder now. Some truths could indeed be more destructive than lies. Yet hiding the truth was no longer an option. A shattered trust. During a confidential briefing, one of our senior analysts was discovered leaking information to unknown recipients. The breach shook the task force to its core. Who could we trust? Every encrypted message, every face, seemed suspect. The veil's reach was deeper than we had feared. Personal toll. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me like gravity. Sleepless nights blurred into days filled with endless meetings and security briefings. I thought of my crew, my family back on Earth, and the countless lives at stake. The pressure was immense, but giving up was never an option. A breakthrough. Amid the turmoil, a breakthrough came in the form of a decrypted communication intercepted from the chain's network. The message hinted at an imminent attack designed to shatter the fragile peace between the Pact and the Revenants. We had mere days to prepare. Rallying the Alliance, I called an emergency council, urging the Pact and Revenants to unite fully against the common threat. This is not just a battle for territory, I told the assembled leaders. It's a battle for the future of every species that calls this galaxy home. There was tension, but also resolve. The Alliance was tested, but the Shadow Force would not divide us, not if we stood together. Preparing for war, we began mobilizing forces, fortifying key systems, and sharing intelligence like never before. Our new joint task force became the spearhead of the defense, combining human ingenuity and Revenant resilience. The days ahead would be hard, but hope flickered. Reflection. That night, I looked out at the stars from my quarters. They burned with cold light, distant but eternal. I realized that the fight against the Oblivion chain was not just a war of weapons, but a war for truth, trust, and survival. And I was ready to face whatever came next. When you stand on the edge of a precipice, you can feel the wind whispering threats in your ear, warnings of the fall ahead. That's how it felt in the days following our emergency council, as if the fragile alliance we had built was wobbling on the brink of collapse, pulled apart by old wounds, hidden agendas, and the rising storm of the Oblivion chain's attack. A shattered trust. Trust is the foundation of any alliance, especially one forged between former enemies like the Pact and the Revenants. But in the aftermath of the Veil's exposure and the uncovering of the Oblivion chain's ancient influence, that foundation had cracked wide open. Our emergency council was tense, a theater of veiled glances, half-spoken accusations, and political undercurrents threatening to drown the urgency of the situation. I sat at the head of the table, flanked by Captain Tlara and representatives from every major faction within the Pact. The Revenants had brought some of their sharpest diplomats, but even they looked uneasy. The first to speak was Ambassador Rethcon, a Pact elder with a reputation for cunning and stubbornness. "We must ensure the security of our worlds," he declared, his voice low but carrying an unmistakable edge. "But we cannot ignore the possibility that some among us might be compromised." That was an understatement. We all knew what he meant. Suspicion of Revenant loyalty was rising in the Pact's political circles. The undercurrents of distrust in whispered corridors and private meetings. Accusations flew like poisoned arrows. Some Pact leaders feared the Revenants' motives. Were they truly allies, or waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim lost glory and power? The Revenants, for their part, bristled at the insinuations, feeling the sting of centuries-old prejudice. Captain Tlara, standing beside me, kept her composure, but I saw the tension in her eyes. "Our people suffered the most from the Oblivion chain," she said quietly during a briefing. "If you doubt our loyalty, ask yourselves, why would we risk everything to fight alongside you now?" Her words were true, but the wounds ran deep. It wasn't just politics, it was history, memory, and fear. Sabotage and internal strife. As we tried to strengthen our defenses, the Oblivion chain struck again. An important supply convoy destined for the Revenant homeworld was ambushed. The attack was precise and brutal, leaving few survivors and crippling critical infrastructure. Investigations revealed more signs of sabotage, communications disrupted, security protocols overridden, and misinformation spread across command channels. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Political maneuvering. Within the Pact, factions seized the crisis to push their agendas. Commander Harold, who had earlier warned about the dangers of exposing certain truths, began rallying those who opposed full cooperation with the Revenants. He argued that the Pact should focus on its own defenses, limiting shared intelligence and resources. "It's naive to trust those who have once been our enemies," Harold stated bluntly in a strategy session. I challenged him, my voice firm. "We don't have the luxury of division now. If we fracture, the Oblivion chain wins." His response was a cold glare. "Sometimes, Captain, survival means choosing the lesser evil." A rift deepens. The growing rift threatened to undo everything we had worked for. Tensions boiled over during a joint security operation on the Revenant world of Callistra Prime. An altercation between Pact soldiers and Revenant militia sparked accusations of betrayal and reckless behavior. The incident nearly escalated into open conflict before I intervened. I stood between the two groups, raising my hands. "This ends now. We are stronger together, or we fall divided." The room fell silent, but the scars remained. Personal struggles. Amid the political chaos, I grappled with my own doubts. The weight of command was suffocating. Every decision felt like walking a razor's edge between war and peace, loyalty and betrayal. Late at night, I confided in Clara. "How do you keep faith in an alliance when the cracks are so deep?" I asked, exhaustion heavy in my voice. She looked out the viewport, stars reflected in her dark eyes. "Because giving up means death, not just for us, but for everyone we protect." Her resolve rekindled my own. An unexpected ally. Just when it seemed all hope might slip away, a surprising message arrived. A faction within the Pact, long silent and politically marginal, offered support for full cooperation with the Revenants. Led by Senator Alarivas, a fierce advocate for unity and transparency, this group called for a new approach, radical openness and joint command structures to rebuild trust. Their manifesto echoed through the corridors of power, inspiring some and infuriating others. Building bridges. Senator Voss and I worked closely, coordinating outreach efforts and joint operations designed to demonstrate the alliance's strength. We organized cultural exchanges between Pact and Revenant populations, emphasizing shared goals and histories. Slowly, the tide began to shift. A warning ignored. Despite these efforts, warnings kept coming. Intelligence reports suggested the Oblivion chain was preparing a multi-pronged assault, targeting key Pact and Revenant installations simultaneously. I pressed the Council to accelerate our defense plans, but opposition remained. Some leaders balked at reallocating resources, fearing loss of influence or control. A fractured front. As the threat grew, the alliance's fractures deepened. It was clear the coming conflict would not only test our military might, but the very bonds holding us together. I found myself at the center of a maelstrom, mediator, commander, and sometimes unwilling diplomat. A moment of resolve. One evening, as I walked the quiet corridors of Helios Reach, I stopped to watch the stars again. They seemed distant, cold, and indifferent to our struggles. But beneath their light, I felt a stubborn spark, the resilience of humanity and those who stood with us. I knew the path ahead would be brutal, filled with sacrifice and loss. But I also knew that if we could hold together, if we could rise above suspicion and fear, we might just survive. And maybe, just maybe, we could win. The air on Helios Reach was thick with tension. Every sensor, every comm channel, was alive with warnings, scrambled transmissions, and static whispers of enemy movements. The day we had feared, the day the Oblivion chain struck, was here. This was no ordinary battle. It was a fight for survival against an enemy that had haunted civilizations for millennia. Our last stand. Dawn of the assault. The morning light spilled weakly through the viewport, a pale reflection of hope amid the encroaching darkness. Reports flooded in. Attacks across the Pact and Revenant systems were happening simultaneously. It was a brutal, coordinated strike designed to cripple us before we could fully respond. Our forces scrambled to their stations, systems locking onto targets, shields humming, weapons charging. I stood on the command deck, heart pounding, watching the tactical displays pulse with the chaos of battle. Unity in action. Despite the fractures that had threatened to tear us apart, today those divisions seemed to vanish, replaced by a shared determination. Pact and Revenant fleets moved in tandem, covering each other's flanks, coordinating strikes with a precision born of desperation and trust. Captain Clara was at my side, her presence steady and calm, a reminder that we were stronger together. The enemy revealed. As the battle raged, our sensors picked up an unusual signature, a massive, cloaked vessel emerging from the Veil Nebula. It wasn't just a ship, it was a fortress, bristling with weapons and dark energy fields unlike anything we'd seen. The Oblivion Chain's flagship. Its arrival changed the battlefield. Enemy forces rallied, emboldened by their command ship's presence. The turning point. The flagship unleashed a devastating barrage aimed at the heart of the Pact's fleet. Shields faltered, ships exploded into fireballs, and for a moment, despair threatened to overwhelm us. But then something unexpected happened. Human ingenuity. Remembering the countless times humanity had faced impossible odds, I ordered a daring maneuver, a risky, high-speed flanking run through a dense asteroid field near the battle zone. The move was dangerous but offered cover and the chance to strike the flagship's vulnerable rear. Our pilots, skilled and fearless, executed flawlessly. Breaking the chain, the assault caught the Oblivion Chain off guard. Our weapons tore through its defenses, and internal explosions rocked the fortress. I coordinated the strike team, directing fighter squadrons and capital ships to press the advantage. Sacrifice and resolve. The flagship's destruction was not without cost. Several of our best ships were lost, and brave pilots gave their lives to buy us time. I felt the sting of every loss deeply. These were not just soldiers, but people, families, and friends. But their sacrifice fueled our resolve. A final gambit. As the flagship collapsed, the chain's remaining forces began to falter. But the leader of the Oblivion Chain, a shadowy figure who had remained elusive until now, made one last move. A suicide attack aimed at Helios Reach itself, face to face with darkness. The flagship's destruction had disrupted the chain's network, but this leader was desperate and dangerous. I took the helm personally, leading the counterattack. The battle was close and brutal, fought in the narrow corridors of space around our ship. Victory and loss. In a final, desperate struggle, we managed to disable the attacker's ship and capture the leader alive. The silence that followed was deafening. Aftermath. With the Oblivion Chain's leadership in our hands and their forces scattered, the galaxy breathed a collective sigh of relief. But the scars of battle would remain for generations. Reflection. Standing once more at the viewport, I looked out at the stars, wounded but unbowed. We had faced the abyss and survived, not because of superior technology or firepower, but because of something uniquely human: our stubbornness, our capacity for hope, and our refusal to give up. The galaxy was still vast and dangerous, but now it was ours to shape. The road ahead. The alliance between the Pact and Revenants was stronger for having been tested. We knew threats would come again, but we were ready. Together,